If you'd like to sponsor an episode or donate to our food services program, please visit us on the web at www.philarmh.org/Chef Jared. Hi, and welcome to Served with Love. I'm your host, Chef Jared Johnson. Today's episode is sponsored by Sally and Stephen Mickelberg. Thank you so much, Sally and Stephen, for your generosity and continued support. I actually know Sally from working with her as a guest chef in the kitchen on multiple occasions, and we've had a lot of fun preparing meals for our family. Today's episode is about marinara sauce. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about marinara sauce, a simple and easy pasta sauce that you can make and have ready for your family in less than 30 minutes. And although it doesn't take long to put it together and it only has a few ingredients, it's not short on flavor or versatility. We use just a few ingredients: olive oil, salt and pepper, some fresh basil and fresh parsley. Today we're going to use some canned tomatoes, and we're using a combination of whole peeled tomatoes and crushed tomatoes. But when they're in season, you can also use regular plum tomatoes. We're not quite to the season for plum tomatoes to be at their peak of ripeness. That usually happens in late July and August, and there's nothing better than fresh marinara sauce with homemade tomatoes. But for today, we're going to use these great canned tomatoes and put together some delicious marinara sauce. What we're going to do today to get started is work with some onions. And we're going to have a future episode with onions where we talk about the best way to dice an onion. But quickly for today, we're going to dice this onion in a medium dice. So what you do is you cut the top off. I have a little container set up over here on the side. We like to make stocks here in our family kitchen, and we use the onion peels and scraps from stock-ready vegetables for us to be able to make our stocks, and that's a great benefit that we can add fresh stocks to for our family's meals. So you just peel the onion back. As you can see, I've left the core on the onion, and when we do our dice, that core here is going to help us to keep the onion together for our dicing technique. So we're going to use one whole onion for this recipe. This is a medium to large onion. For the dice, you want to put the onion on its flat side down so it's nice and safe, and we're going to do about a ½ inch dice or a medium dice for today, and so every cut that we make is going to be 1/2 inch from the previous cut. So we're going to start by going straight down on the onion. Each cut is a ½ inch from the previous cut, but we're going to keep that core intact and not cut all the way through the back of the onion. Then we're going to make a quarter turn, and with our knife horizontal to the cutting board, we're going to come up 1/2 inch and go through the onion, but not all the way through the back of the onion again, so our onion is still intact. And then we just go straight down. ½ inch in, ½ inch in, ½ inch in, and we have a nice ½ inch dice. And then you can just take this little part around the end and cut that off. We're going to discard the core and use that in our stock. And there's our dice for today. Real quickly, I'll just do the other half of the onion. And that's the onion that we're going to use for the recipe today. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take some whole cloves of garlic. We're going to use about 6 cloves of garlic for this recipe. This garlic's already been peeled. We're just going to take the core off, remove that. A little bit of core gets into the marinara sauce. It's not going to make a difference. And again, we'll use this for our stock. But the core has a tendency to make things bitter, and so you want to make sure you're removing the core where possible. So then we're just going to give this a quick smash with the back end of our knife. Don't even have to do any chopping. This is just going to release the oils and make all the flavor of that garlic come out. And we don't have to worry about getting bits of or chunks of garlic when you're biting into the marinara sauce, because ultimately we're going to use our immersion blender and make this a nice smooth marinara sauce at the end. So now we have our garlic set aside. Now we're going to take some fresh herbs We have a little parsley from our garden that we've already cleaned. And some fresh basil. And so for the basil, we're going to do a chiffonade of basil. These are whole basil leaves. To do a chiffonade is like a ribbon cut. So we're going to peel the leaves off of the stem, discard the stem, but that's also going to go for our stock. So you take all your leaves, you stack them up together. Again, this doesn't have to be super neat because we are going to use our immersion blender later today and buzz all of this basil right into the marinara sauce. But by putting your basil together like this, it makes it very easy for you then to roll the basil up. And then with your knife, you're just going to make little slices through the edge of the basil. This is a chiffonade cut or a ribbon cut. And that's good like that. You don't have to go through it more than once. There's the basil for the recipe. Now we're going to take our fresh parsley. I typically like to use flat Italian parsley for this recipe, but we have this great curly parsley that we grow in our garden. It's not really going to change the flavor at all. This is going to go really nice in our marinara sauce today. Again, we'll save that for our stock. With the parsley, you just kind of want to pinch it up. We're just going to do a rough chop. Go over this a couple of times. And that's it. So now that we have our mise en place all together, we can start to build the marinara sauce in the pot. So I'm going to get the pot started. We're going to put that on medium heat. We're just going to let that start to get hot for a second. I talk about mise en place, again, because of the importance of having everything in its place when you're putting together really any dish. But something as quick as marinara sauce that's going to happen as fast as marinara sauce is, it's very important for you to have everything that you're going to need right at your fingertips so it can all come together easily for you. So we have two different kinds of tomatoes that we're going to use today. We have whole peeled tomatoes and we have crushed tomatoes. We have our herbs, we have our onions, our garlic. And when I do this at home, I like to use red wine for this recipe. But here at the Ronald McDonald House, we like to make sure that we are not introducing alcohol into the dishes unless absolutely necessary. And so for something like a replacement for red wine, I'm using a little bit of cranberry juice today, and then just a little bit of red wine vinegar. I like to use cranberry juice. You can also use grape juice. But the cranberry juice has a little more tartness and not as much sweetness as the grape juice, but it has a nice balance between the two. And then for every cup of juice that you're going to use for a recipe, you're going to use 1 tablespoon of vinegar. And the vinegar adds the acidity that you're really looking for, especially if you're doing something like deglazing the pan. So now we have our pot. It's nice and heated up and ready to go. We're going to put a little olive oil in the bottom of the pot. And we're going to get started with our onions. A little salt and pepper. Some cracks of black pepper. And so with these onions, you're not looking to get a whole lot of color on the onions. You're not looking to cook these onions or caramelize them, anything like that. You're just trying to sweat them down a little bit, get them to bring their natural flavors out until they're translucent in color. It's going to take about 5 minutes. In the meantime, again, going back to the mise en place, we have to boil pasta for this recipe. So if you're doing this at home, you're going to want to get your pot of water going on the stovetop as you're like prepping your ingredients and getting everything ready. Then when you have your ingredients ready to go, you can start building your marinara, and shortly thereafter your water will come up to a boil so you can time your marinara being ready for your pasta being ready. And again, the benefit of marinara sauce coming together so quickly, if the marinara sauce is done a little bit in advance, you just turn it off the heat and it's ready to go and serve over your pasta when your pasta's ready. So we have our water going for our pasta right here, and the water's up to a boil and ready to drop. We have our pasta right here. We're just doing a family serving, so this is 1 pound of pasta. You can really use any kind of pasta you like, tubes, long pasta, but for today we're using rotini for our recipe. So we're going to drop the pasta in. And I like to agitate the pasta within the first 30 seconds of dropping it down in the water, just to make sure that none of the pasta is going to stick together. And when it's finished its cooking time, it's really a nice finished product. So now our pasta's down. Our onions are just about ready here. So now we're going to put the rest of this together. So what we do is we take our garlic and our herbs that we prepped, put them in with our onions. A little more salt and pepper. Give that a little stir. You really only need to do this once you put the garlic and the herbs in for about a minute more. Just trying to get some of the flavor out, the garlic and the herbs. Before we add our tomatoes, when you're working with whole peeled tomatoes like these, I like to put them in a bowl first so that before I add them to the pot, I can crush the tomatoes with my hands so that it makes everything come together a little easier, and also so you don't have a bad mess when you go to use your immersion blender later. So now our herbs have been in there and our garlic has been in there with the onions for about a minute. And so now we are going to use our wine, actually our cranberry juice and our red wine vinegar, and add that in. And so this is where you want to use your spoon. And if any little bits kind of got stuck on the bottom of the pot, any of that garlic or herb is down in there, you use your spoon just to kind of knock them loose, get them off the bottom of the pot, so we make sure that nothing burns when we add our tomatoes. This is coming together great. And you just let this come all the way up to a boil, and we're just going to let that cook down just a little bit before we add in our tomatoes. So now we've got our cranberry juice going and it's starting to simmer down. Before I add the tomatoes, I'm going to just crush these up in my hand. You don't want to squeeze too hard. Just gently squeeze and break the tomatoes apart. It's just to kind of break these tomatoes open and they'll blend into the marinara sauce nice and easy. So now they're all broken up. We're going to add these right into the pot. This is a 28-ounce can of tomatoes. Both cans are 28 ounces. Now we're going to add the crushed tomatoes. What I like to do is take just a little bit of water and just go around the pot to make sure we get all of those tomatoes out of the inside of the can. And they can go in there too. So after you add your tomatoes and you're bringing it up to a boil, before you turn it down to a gentle simmer, I like to add just a little more salt and pepper at this time. You know, when you're building marinara, you have to start with a foundation of flavor and then build on the foundation of flavor. And so the seasoning is very important all the way through the process. So we're just going to give this a little stir before we turn it down. Give it a taste. Make sure we're on the right track. Oh, delicious. That is going to be delicious. All right, we're going to turn this down to a little bit of a simmer now. After about 15 minutes, that'll be ready to blend up and put over our pasta. So now that our marinara sauce has simmered for about 15 minutes and it's ready to go, we're going to use an immersion blender to buzz this right while it's on the stovetop to get it to be a nice, smooth consistency. So I have an immersion blender here. Just want to say thank you so much to Tina Gambone and the folks at Conchi Bakery for making such a wonderful donation to the house. And with that donation, we were able to get some really great appliances and cookware that we're using today. And this immersion blender is one of them. Thank you so much, Tina Gambone. So you take your immersion blender. It has this long stainless steel shaft that can take high temperatures. And we're going to drop it down inside. It has 2 speeds. So we're going to start it on low speed and just start to buzz this together. What you want to make sure is that you don't bring the propeller blade up out of the top of the marinara sauce while you're blending it. If you do that, it could create a horrible mess and ricochet marinara sauce all over the kitchen and all over yourself, and nobody's going to like that very much, especially when it's piping hot. So you just want to make sure that you start slow. A low blend is all that you need. You don't even really need to put this one on high. This is just about all the way blended. If you feel like there's some clumps of tomato or garlic that are up near the surface and you want to blend them, just release your finger off the button and put the immersion blender directly on top of that piece, get it just below the surface, and hit the button again. That way it doesn't splash anywhere. So just let that go a little bit longer. Make sure it's good and blended together, which it is. Terrific. And so now our pasta is about 30 seconds away. We have our marinara done. Let's give it a taste. Oh, spectacular. Ready to go. You want to put just a little more salt, another crack of pepper. Perfect. Pasta's ready. We're just going to take our pasta right over to the sink. Drain it in the colander. And what I like to do is put the hot pot right back on the stovetop. And over high heat, I put the pasta right back into the pot. So we put the pasta right back in the pot because we want to make sure that we get rid of that excess water. Did you ever have a dish of pasta and you put good sauce on it and just water runs out from the pasta all over the plate and you have a watery pasta dish? Nobody wants that. So I like to just get it in the pot for another couple of seconds before we plate up and make sure we get rid of that extra water. And so now we're ready to plate it up. Marinara sauce is done. I like to put just a little bit in the bottom of the bowl. You can see the specks of the herbs. It's beautiful. Nice big serving of rotini. A little more marinara on the top. I like to take a little Parmesan cheese. And lastly, just a little bit of fresh parsley. Nothing fancy about this. You just want to break up some leaves, have a little extra parsley for the dish. And there you have it. Rotini with quick and easy marinara sauce. A very special thank you again to Sally and Stephen Mickelberg for sponsoring this episode of Served with Love. Really looking forward to having guest chefs back in the kitchen and having the opportunity to work with you again, Sally. We really miss having our guest chefs in the kitchen. Please tune in for next week's episode where we'll be talking about stocks, the benefits of making homemade stock, and some dishes that we can use with our homemade stock that we make. Thank you very much for tuning into this week's episode. This episode of Served with Love was sponsored by Sally and Stephen Mickelberg. We'd also like to thank the following companies for their support. Thank you to Tina Gambone and Conshohocken Bakery for donating our cooking tools and appliances. Almo Corporation donated our large appliances for the family kitchen. For ingredients and information on how you can support our food services program, please visit us on the web at www.philarmh.org/Chef Jared. You can also contact me with any questions by email at chefjared@philarmh.org. Thank you.